Hello and welcome to not election corner, a little bit election corner. Needs a new name. The newsstand? Newsbox? You'll see whatever I've decided to label it as in the title, but maybe I'll put an election corner this time and then come up with something new next time. Well, either way, this headline Iowa governor confirms plan for felon voting executive order. This whole story would have been a big deal if there wasn't protests, coronavirus, Donald Trump being Donald Trump, the Supreme Court suddenly making a decision no one was expecting, and now people are on the conservative side are saying the Heritage Foundation has failed. A whole mess of things. The fact that Confederate bases might be renamed. There's a lot of stuff going on. But this is probably going to be one of the most important headlines of 2020, and it's not getting covered that much. Now, naturally, it's covered by AP and it was reported, but not many people are paying attention. That's because it was overshadowed by the Supreme Court decision, and now it's been overshadowed later by more talk about, hey, Confederate bases might be renamed, or military bases named after Confederates. But here you have it. So, to explain the situation, this is Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds, pictured here with Mike Pence and a local state senator, I believe. Oh, local state senator sent a Randy Fenstra. But Kim Reynolds was elected in 2018. She is a Republican governor, the Republican governor of Iowa. Now, she, back in 2018, in that session, which is still going on, made a request that the Iowa State Legislature vote on a legislative amendment, or a constitutional amendment to the Iowa Constitution, to allow felons to vote after they've been released from prison, not while they're in prison. It's kind of better, it's not the most amazing, but it would mean Iowa, we would finally have it so upon release from prison, felons will automatically at some point receive the right to vote in all 50 states and DC, which has been a big goal of activists, and we've seen a massive turnaround on it in the past 4 years. But that's not really the point of this headline. You see, what would have happened if they had, because she just said they need to vote on it. Because back in I think 2011, I think it says it in the article actually. 2003, Governor Vilsack restored the enabled automatic felon voting rights restoration. But in 2011, Governor Branstad, another Republican governor who received the nickname in the state Brain Dead, returned to office. When he got the office, he completely reversed the executive order, meaning if you were a felon before 2011, your right to vote was restored. But if you're a felon after, your right to vote was not. In this case, Kim Reynolds said, I'm going to overturn that. And that was a very basic campaign promise. And she said, we'll add it as an amendment to the Constitution of Iowa. Which, great. I have no issue with that. But if you haven't noticed, Republicans have been a little bit on restoring voting rights for felons, like in Florida, after the people voted for it, they added basically a poll tax on top. And that's what the Iowa amendment was. It was, you get the right to vote after you pay a small fee to get the right to vote again. Essentially, a poll tax for felons, which is illegal, but besides that. And when the Iowa State Senate killed it, had this happened a year ago, I can all but confirm it would have been dropped there. Iowa would fail to restore felon voting rights, and everyone would go, darn, we need to elect Democrats. But today, yesterday, technically, the same day as the Iowa Senate said, we're not passing the amendment, it's dead. Or I think they voted and it failed to pass. Kim Reynolds comes out and says, nope, I am restoring voting rights for felons using an executive order, and I'm going to ask the state Senate to vote on this again next session, I believe. So why is this a big deal? Because restoring the right to vote for felons is nice, but not the big point here. It's the fact that Kim Reynolds now feels enough pressure to restore felon voting rights. The fact that whatever is happening has spooked her. And so, for example, members of Des Moines' Black Lives Matter insisted on meeting Friday with Reynolds, who agreed to talk with them on Monday. She says her discussions with advocates for changing Iowa's felon voting laws have been bumpy, but were improving. And then use the usual logic excuse of, well, they just don't know what I can do and what they can do, which is a little bit of the truth, and typically is a half-truth. That also means it's a half-lie. It means I don't want to. But Iowa needs a constitutional amendment to properly instate this into law. Now, why did she do this? She's feeling pressure from Black Lives Matter. She's seeing that her Senate race is in a bad position. And more specifically, if you had to ask me, she's up for re-election in 2022. She can see where the wind is blowing. You want to be ahead of the curve on this. We're already seeing Republicans start to capitulate. Technically speaking, 2 cities are in the process of defunding the police right now. That's how successful protests are. I know Minneapolis is in the process of doing it, and I think Salt Lake is looking at doing it too. We'll see if they're proper defundings, but enough that it might solve the problem. We're seeing Confederate bases being renamed. We're seeing decent reforms going through at the statewide level, Donald Trump's executive order notwithstanding on the decent category. But this shows a very interesting trend, because I have a feeling, how can I put this, without sounding like a dictator? The issue with protests is, especially in a society where you don't shoot them, if you give in to their demands, people realize they have power, and they will keep protesting. Now, does anyone remember what happened after Ferguson? I won't, all the protests, all that jazz. Remember all the big deal legislation that was passed to handle it and everything? Because I don't. I don't remember the Republican House and Senate doing anything in the Congress, and I remember minor reforms going through at the state level in both Democratic and Republican states. Now we're genuinely seeing the chance, one, the culture of the United States has now vastly turned against police, and that's really their own fault. They want to be pseudo-SS? Congrats. People don't like the pseudo-SS. They don't like the real SS, and they don't like the cheap American knockoff. But we're now seeing Republican legislatures capitulate, and to an extent Democrats, because I've seen a lot of people talk about the Democrats' Justice in Policing Act, their big police reform bill, which I personally find lacking, and will be releasing a video critiquing and expanding on that, hopefully in the next couple of days. But here's the key factor. Democrats basically immediately, their baseline, at the federal level, at the statewide level they're going further, at the federal level was basically, here's a list of reforms that you all asked for back in Ferguson, and we're just going to give you all of them. Except for handling, what's it called? The one involving where the police can just take your money. Civil asset forfeiture. Except for civil asset forfeiture. But we are witnessing them basically capitulating on all accounts. Taking all the most radical bills and saying, we'll pass them, we'll pass them, we'll pass them. From the Ferguson era. Nothing about prisons or sentencing reform, but they really are just focusing on police right now. At the local and statewide level, there are serious talks in the Democratic Party about totally defunding police departments and replacing them with social workers. In the cultural zeitgeist, Americans have turned against the police. There is no version of this where people are going to go, oh, well, I really, really like the police now. Whenever there's a case of police brutality, or anyone gets shot by a cop, people are going to assume the cop is guilty by default, except the minority who are never going to believe that. And now the majority of Americans will believe cops are at fault. So what are we witnessing, and why is this story so important? To summarize, well, the protests are working. And they're only on week 1. Really. Technically week 2, but in practice week 1. Imagine if these protests go on for a month. Or 2 months, or 3 months. Imagine what happens the next time another young black man is killed by police. How long... Because we've gone from, in 4 years, keep this in mind, we went from law and order is the only way to solve the problems in this country involving crime to defund the police. And defund the police happened in maybe a week. Next time it's abolish. That is how radical things are getting right now. Not saying it's a bad radical, but I'm saying it's radical. The fact that Republicans, after a week, are feeling pressure to restore felon voting rights, rename Confederate bases, take down Confederate statues, and we're not even in, like, no offense, people aren't even in any way as violent as they could be to get this stuff. If you look out, like, genuinely, if you look at the damage, if these are riots, they are the most peaceful riots in the world. Yes, people burn down a few buildings. People do that after bloody football games. Philadelphia willingly does it to its own city after football games. If you wanted a riot, genuinely imagine what it would be like if all of these people just went, fuck it. I'm gonna burn down this city. Whether it was New York, DC, Philly, LA, Seattle, Chicago, the Twin Cities, St. Louis, you name it, they could do it. This is them being restrained. And I think there's a part in their brains right now, the Republicans are just going, we're gonna lose. And if we lose the trifecta at the federal level, it's over. We already clearly don't have good control over the Supreme Court. We're already not doing that hot on the whole, we might lose the Senate. And we're really not doing well in the presidential race, and we have no hope of retaking the House. And we look like we're going to lose even more states. The fact that they're already going, well, we'll restore felon voter rights, and there are caveats in this bill, and executive order. Don't get me wrong, it's not in any way perfect, but the fact that Republicans are at the very least going, we will give you the barest minimum of reform, is really telling. And shows the direction this country is headed in. If we get to the 1 month mark on Black Lives Matter, the George Floyd protests, then what is essentially a modern civil rights movement, then we're going to start seeing real action. I'm willing to bet that by the end of this thing, at least 5 major cities will have defunded their police, or at least attempted to. I'm not trusting they'll do it perfectly. If this goes on for 2 months, 20. 3, we're going to get a lot closer to abolishing some federal grants. Then go prisons. And to clarify, defunding the police and clearing out the prisons doesn't just mean throwing dangerous people back on the streets. It means getting the dangerous people the help they need. If you genuinely look at who's imprisoned, if we decriminalized all nonviolent offenses, and like I said, I'm going to make a proper video on this, decriminalize all nonviolent offenses, no bail, eliminate cash bail, and, you know what, defund the police and direct things in other directions. Suicide, if a person's feeling like committing suicide, we make a 3-digit suicide hotline. They call that the so-called 911 for the brain, 988 as it's being proposed. Make it so everyone's guaranteed housing. Homelessness becomes a non-issue. If people feel secure in their wealth, they're not going to commit robberies. Homicides will still be a problem, but if people can get mental help, like therapy, for free, then, or at no cost to themselves, since people get mad when you use the word free. At no cost to themselves. Then you end up with a much more different scenario, where people can work out their differences in peaceful settings. If you respond to every non-violent offense with a social work team, as opposed to an armed cop, that's how you end a situation and make someone's life better. Most things people are imprisoned for break them. Prison is meant to break a person. And what we're seeing right now is the system cannot stand with people turning against it. This small bill, this thing that if a Democrat governor did, no one would pay heed, and right now, because of all the big fiery things going on, no one's paying attention to it right now, anyway, is a sign of where this country is going. And why I am genuinely hopeful if somehow, you've seen my predictions, Trump could keep the White House. It's unlikely, but he could. If he did, have a little bit of hope for the country. Because right now we saw a case where it went protesters versus police. Trump tried to call in the military, and they sided with the protesters. With that all being said, this has been One Man Think Tank. If you liked the video, please leave a like down below, and a comment on your opinion of this video. Otherwise, click the subscribe button and the notification bell. Otherwise, as always, have a wonderful day.